Hello, and thank you for downloading the Witness History podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Ian McNess, and today I'm taking you back to 1992 and a health scare in the US that made headlines across the globe. I've been speaking to plastic surgeon Alan Matarazzo about the time America banned silicone-filled breast implants. On the 6th of January 1992, the US government ordered a suspension of all procedures involving silicone breast implants.
Plastic surgeons in Britain are trying to reassure women about the safety of breast implants after concern in America over possible health risks.
2,500 women had complained of poor health and pain after receiving the implants. Among the issues mentioned were ruptures of the implants, connective tissue diseases, and even fears of a possible link with cancers.
The United States Food and Drug Administration advised doctors to stop using the implants for 45 days, while new evidence is considered.
The ban was a shock because millions of women around the world had received silicone breast implants since their introduction 3 decades earlier.
The news from the United States highlighting fears the implants could pose health risks by leaking or causing tissue disease has left a mood of fear and uncertainty amongst women who've had the operation.
Alan Matarazzo is a New York plastic surgeon.
There had been interest for a long time about enlarging breasts, reconstructing it after trauma or reconstructing it after cancer. And they eventually evolved into a silicone polymer, one that acts as the shell, and then the silicone gel that's actually what we call the fill.
Implants proved popular for both cosmetic and non-cosmetic surgery, and later a second type of fill was invented.
A saline fill, so inside the silicone shell, was either a silicone gel or a saline. And silicone was always the most popular of the fills. It felt more natural and looked more natural as it sat underneath the chest wall or the breast itself and augmented the natural breast. It then became consistently number 1 or number 2 of the most popular plastic surgery procedures done every year. And of course, more than 80% of reconstruction after cancer is also done with implants. And then you have congenital anomalies where one breast doesn't develop or one breast develops too much. We only think of the market as cosmetic, but there's a lot of other situations where the implants are used.
But the regulation of breast implants in the US lagged decades behind their introduction. They came under the mandate of the FDA years after their invention, and it took until the late 1980s for the regulator to require manufacturers to prove that they were safe. Then in the early 90s, more and more women who'd had silicone implants started to make complaints. And as Alan Matarazzo recalls, there was also an issue with the coating on some of these implants.
They put almost a thin fabric around it. It was called polyurethane. People thought that they may have had some benefit in reducing scar tissue. And right around the same time as the silicone moratorium, there became some issues with that implant. People felt that the outer coat, the polyurethane, broke down and could go to the lymph nodes and create cancer or things like that. And there were really front page articles in the Wall Street Journal about it. And I think the confluence of events at the time encouraged the Food and Drug Administration to look back on how the approval process was done for the implants originally.
And so in early 1992, the FDA announced its ban on the use of silicone gel implants for cosmetic purposes. But many plastic surgeons were skeptical, arguing that the procedures had been conducted successfully for 30 years without any firm evidence of problems. It looked to them like the manufacturers were being asked to prove a negative.
The feeling is the authorities across the Atlantic have overreacted.
There's a lot of hysteria appearing and there's a lot of misleading results. We're still waiting for any scientific evidence that stands up to scrutiny that there is any danger from these implants. As to my knowledge, there is none at all yet.
The biggest problem with breast implants that sometimes is not emphasized enough is that these are foreign bodies. They're not meant to last forever, and they're implanted in your body. And the body has a natural immune response to anything that's put in it, and it forms scar tissue around it, a capsule. Everyone gets some form of a capsule, but some people it gets very, very hard.
The three main implant manufacturers faced lawsuits from women in the US courts. Unable to provide the right documentation, in the end they agreed to pay billions of dollars in damages to millions of people across the United States and the rest of the world.
Thousands of women who claim they've suffered illnesses because of silicone breast implants could soon receive compensation. The American Dow Corning Corporation, one of the world's largest manufacturers of implants, has offered an out-of-court settlement of more than $3 billion. About 175,000 women have lodged claims against the company.
Studies of thousands of women have failed to show firm evidence that silicone implants can cause major health problems. Although the manufacturers have agreed to pay out, they still deny they're dangerous.
It is frustrating to know that the research is so solidly in support that implants do not cause disease, and yet have a settlement that's at $3.2 billion. On the other hand, I think there's also a notion that at a certain time on a controversy that is this deep, there's a time to agree to disagree.
As a result of the controversy, Dow Corning went into administration in 1995. The less attractive saline implants were the only option for American women until the FDA dropped its ban on silicone gel versions in 2006. Do you think it was an overreaction on the part of the government, or do you think it was a good thing it hadn't been looked at enough?
You know, a lot of thought went into this. I think that, placing anything under scrutiny, as long as it's done for good reasons, certainly when it's elective and healthy people, is something to consider.
So what do we now know about the possible dangers of one of the world's most popular forms of cosmetic surgery? Well, long-term studies into silicone implants have now ruled them to be safe in the overwhelming majority of cases, and there's no evidence of a link to cancers. But there is still a small risk of the silicone gel leaking, and there are other potential problems which regulators want patients to consider before what is, after all, often an optional procedure.
One was ALCL, anaplastic lymphoma. It's not a breast cancer, but it basically was found in people that had textured implants. In the early 90s, I mentioned that they coated the implant with this polyurethane. Well, in the 2000s, what they did was they roughed up the surface, almost as if you took sandpaper on the outside of the implant and you made it a little rougher. And the idea was that it would reduce the incidence of that firm fibrous capsule.
And a range of symptoms seemingly related to silicone implants have become known as BII, or breast implant illness.
Muscle pain, joint pain, brain fog, fatigue, and that's being very actively studied now to determine, is there a subset of people that shouldn't have implants? How often this occurs? What are common situations?
Today, Alan Matarazzo continues to be a practicing plastic surgeon and a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. He says he's proud of the work the Society is continuing to do to ensure there's transparency about the safety of breast implants.
We encourage patients to understand that these are not lifetime devices. They are implants. They are not, their own body's tissue, and there can be things associated with them. And we want them aware going into that, while it's a highly successful operation and study after study has shown tremendous satisfaction with it, that there are concerns that they have to be aware of.
Alan Matarazzo was speaking to me, Ian McNess, for this edition of Witness History. It was a Made in Manchester production for the BBC World Service.